You're watching This Week, 60 minutes of analytical review of the big stories of the week. I'm Constance Ikoku. In the week, the International Monetary Fund supported Central Bank of Nigeria's recent interest rate hikes and foreign exchange measures, describing them as suitable steps to stabilize the economy. IMF gave the endorsement at the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. The international lender acknowledged CBN's efforts in controlling inflation and stabilizing the foreign exchange market, which it said are positive indicators of progress. It also acknowledged the difficulties many citizens are facing with the rising cost of living. To help us make sense of the hike in interest rate and the likely economic implications, we have joining us in the studio an economist, Dr. Aki Ogunsola. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Constance. You're a Nigerian, so let's start with before you're an economist, you're a Nigerian, so you must be feeling the pinch of all that is going on. How are you surviving, first of all?
Yeah, we are surviving with some basic economic knowledge that we have of saving for the rainy day and also cutting down costs, of living. So if we have been eating fat before, you have to cut down the cost and ensure that you are managing so that you can keep moving. So
you actually have something saved up. Not everybody has something saved up. There are different income levels in Nigeria. The people at the bottom are really finding it very difficult.
Oh, yeah. It's actually difficult now because we've seen persistent increase, in the price of food especially, and that's what has been driving inflation, and people can barely save. For myself, I've just been living on the previous savings, that I've had, and that has actually helped, in surviving. But for those at the bottom, in fact, they can barely survive because they just seek for help from anywhere that they can get the help.
So let's look at this IMF endorsement of the latest increase in interest rate by the CBN. It was raised from 18.75% to 22.75%. Is this endorsement a good thing, and what does that even mean for the country?
All right. I would say that the advice of the IMF is actually not too good for Nigeria because I think our case is peculiar here.
Okay.
I think CBN also need to recall that the monetary policy aspect is not enough to actually control inflation. We have to also consider the fiscal policy. What are the fiscal policy? Policies around the subsidy removal, increase in fuel prices, increase in government spending, and all that. So we need to balance it up with the fiscal policy. We cannot see CBN tightening the economy, continuously, increasing lending rates, increasing MPR and all that. And then the federal government on the other side, increasing the price of fuel from about twice within a month. And it means that we'll continue to increase the rates, and then federal government will continue to remove subsidy, and then the price of fuel continues to go up. That will not help us. So if IMF is only concentrating on the policies of central bank, the Minister of Finance also need to look inwards on other policies of government concerning energy, the price of energy, the salary of workers, and so many other government spending, major government spending. They need to be looked into so that we can actually curtail this inflation.
But you and I know that now we have total deregulation. So it looks like nothing will be done about whether it's reinstating subsidy or reversing the cost of petrol, So how do you see things playing out over the next maybe 6 months?
Okay, let me start by correcting that.
Right.
I'm not sure we have total deregulation yet.
Okay.
If we have total deregulation, we will not be saying that Dangote refinery is not supplying adequate, petrol to the Nigerian economy. We see NNPC not still buying enough petrol from Dangote refineries, and then we still see some, little percentage of importation of both the jet fuel, aviation fuel, PMS, and also diesel. So it's not really 100%, and that's why we said maybe Nigerians should still expect, we are still envisaging maybe a further increase in the petrol price. because federal government has not totally, I think just recently NNPC said they are going to totally remove themselves as being a middleman.
But they've used the word that it's totally deregulated. That's what the Minister of Petroleum Resources State Oil says, that it has been deregulated.
That's what they said when they increased the price of fuel from 600 to 800 and from 800 to 1,000. That's what still they are saying. So we cannot really bank on what they are telling us, actually. But looking at these prices, and now we are in 1,030 in Abuja. I know further in the north is a little higher than that. In the next 6 months, just like you asked, if government does not do anything to stabilize energy, the price of petrol, diesel, and all that, if it's not stabilized, if it's not maintained, we'll still continue to see further increase. This is actually practical, because you see in the month of July, we saw inflation coming down to 32% after about 9 months of continuous rise. Also, the following month, which was August, we saw inflation still coming down a little again. But in September 3rd precisely, federal government decided to increase the petrol price from 680 to about 800. And immediately we saw inflation, a sharp increase in inflation. So it's not something that they need IMF to come and advise us on what is causing the inflation. Everybody knows what is causing the inflation. As soon as cost of transportation goes up, every price of every other thing will actually go up.
You have said that the government need not specifically listen to the IMF. Some people share that sentiment, some do not. But why do you think that consistently it looks like we've been wedded to these organizations and the government continues to work with them?
Yeah, the reason why we are wedded is because we are getting some financial aid from the IMF and the World Bank.
Is it possible to stop this?
Well, maybe by the time President is presenting this year's budget, we can know whether they want to stop it. Because time immemorial, from the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, we've been seeing deficit budgeting. And deficit budgeting simply interprets that we are going to borrow to finance the deficit. So at the point of preparing the budget, we've already planned to borrow. And who are we borrowing from? We are borrowing from the World Bank. We are borrowing from the IMF. So if we are saying that maybe we'll stop borrowing from them, then possibly we'll begin to see a budget surplus. Then that's when we now know that, okay, we have a surplus budget. So government is deciding to reduce its expenditure so that we will not further borrow. So we look forward to see. But I think from all indications, because what they've been saying is that the budget is not enough. Even the 30-something trillion that we have now is still not enough. So
it's very tiny for a country as big as
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
When you convert it to dollars, isn't
it?
So the exchange rate is a determinant factor because that's the center that feels that actually brings out the effect of all the policies from both the monetary and the fiscal policy. We'll see the effect on the exchange rate. Now the exchange rate is going up again. Now I think about 1,720 on the parallel market, and on the I and E window, we'll get 1,650 or 660. We continue to see that dollar is actually still rising higher than the naira, and that is not good for our economy. Okay,
so rising interest rates makes borrowing expensive. Please, can you make that make sense to us? Because for a lot of people, especially businesses, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, when you continue to borrow, now the interest rate, what the interest rate does, why the CBN is increasing it, number one, it helps to reduce the amount of money in circulation. It helps to discourage, borrowing for people to actually do business so that the economy will slow down in such a way that, yes, we can now begin to recover. And that is on the, monetary policy side. But just like I said, it is just classroom knowledge that when interest rate is going up, you increase when inflation is going up, you increase your interest rate, your MPR, so that you slow down, the inflation. So
what do you see are the risks when this remains elevated for a long time?
Yeah, the risk is that the cost of living will continue to get high. Nigerians will continue to be impoverished by the time they exchange, you change what their earnings is into dollars. They continue to go impoverished. We'll see the number of people that have slid into poverty increasing to over 150 million Nigerians sliding below poverty line. So this is what you continue to see. People continue to struggle because their income is not coming, because they have slowed down the economy as a result of increase in interest rate and also the monetary policy rate. So government needs to actually look away from this classroom knowledge of inflation is going up, let us increase this. But what about the price of petroleum that is making prices of things to go up? That's not part of CBN's monetary policy decisions.
When you look at this government, do you have confidence that they have the capacity and the vision to take another road?
Yes, government has every potential to
This particular
government. Just look at some few days back, he rejected his cabinet.
Yes.
That's to show you that he's in control of, of the administration.
But all the managers of the economy, he left them intact. That means he's okay with the direction that the economy is going.
Yes.
Whether it's finance, whether it's budget and national planning. Yes. Yeah. Whether it's industry, trade and investment, he
moving
changed.
To finance.
Then marine and blue economy. Well, mostly they are still there.
Yes, they are there because even talking about Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State for Petroleum is still there. Possibly because he feels that he's still okay with it. But I believe that government can make a U-turn. For how long are we going to continue? Now, he has promised Nigerians severally. He has spent a year and about 3 or 4 months in office now. And he kept promising Nigerians that everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. But things are getting worse. And Nigerians are fast losing confidence in the promises that the president is giving. But the president can still make a U-turn. People are calling that president should bring back a little subsidy into the energy sector so that prices of things can come down.
Then when you bring out subsidy, don't you think it's important that you make sure you remove the corruption there, the fraud, because it's part of the problem?
Yeah, the corruption and the fraud can be tracked. It can actually be monitored if government is willing to monitor with technology. We know that the story that they are telling us about a lot of our fuel is finding its way outside the country. Those things are, archaic. We can actually track. There are trackers to track the trailers. They have awarded contracts to track the movement of trailers within the country so that we'll know the ones that are going outside. But those things are not working because of corruption. If government insists that this will work, it's going to definitely work. I believe that. And
it's interesting when you talk about trackers, because I was watching an interview of Mr. Aliko Dangote, and he said that their trucks will have trackers.
Yeah.
So they know where they are going, within, outside the country. You will be tracked. So it's not impossible. It's just that we have an inefficient system.
Absolutely.
You think this government will be able to change that,
yes,
or to arrest that?
The government has the capacity to do that. It's just the political willingness, the willingness of the president and the government to take drastic decisions on this. It doesn't take them anything to actually make a U-turn.
So let's look at some figures. South of the Sahara, lending rate in Senegal is less than 10%. In South Africa, it's about 11%. In Kenya, it's about 12%. Are there a few things that we can learn or borrow from these countries? We're all in the same geographical space, and they seem to be doing a bit better than Nigeria.
Oh, yeah. There are so many things that we can learn from them. These countries you have mentioned, they never floated their currency. Their currency is still way much better in terms of exchange to the US dollar. It's still way more better than the Naira. The Naira seems to be the worst performing currency as we speak. I think one of the policies that is affecting us when it comes in terms with comparing ourselves with them is the floating of the Naira. The decision to float the Naira has actually, brought our economy backwards. And I think government needs to also take a decision around that. Once government can stabilize the exchange rate, Nigeria can pick up again. Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa.
No longer. For now.
It's because of the exchange rate.
Yes.
It's just because of that exchange rate. Because we did floating of the Naira,
yes,
and also removal of subsidy almost at the same time. That made us to actually go back. But the only way we can actually, wake up again, or the economy can be boosted again, is by us looking into a kind of some subsidy, either subsidy from the exchange rate or subsidy from energy. One of them has to work, but putting the two at the same time is actually what we are facing in the country now is actually making us to go back.
And you see, what is more glaring, when you think about it and look at the figures again, let's look at the inflation rates, for instance, again in this country. So Kenya, inflation is less than 4%.
Yeah.
Can you beat that? And then, in fact, the Central Bank of Kenya is cutting interest rate, and the macroeconomic environment is stable. In South Africa, inflation is less than 5%. In Senegal, it's less than 5%. So when you now think about Nigeria that has food inflation over 40%, now it hits you what we're really dealing with.
Of course. Now, we've seen that the rise in inflation is not just peculiar to Africa alone. We see inflation rising in the UK, inflation rising even in the US a little bit, maybe because of the tension of the elections and all that. But when it comes to Africa, Nigeria case particularly, the reason why inflation is going up, just like I said, is not about the monetary aspect of it. Our central bank governor is actually doing very well, handling his own aspect. But the fiscal policy of government, that is where the problem is. We see a lot of, the decisions around the energy sector is not clear. Imagine a government increasing the price of fuel twice in 1 month, and the increase is not just a little. Is significant increase. It's just automatic that inflation will set in. It's not skyrocket science. So those decisions around the energy sector, NNPC still battling with being there, or we want to fully deregulate, or we want Dangote only to be producing PMS. What about the other? All those decisions around the energy sector is affecting us, and that is what is affecting the inflation figures.
And now that you mentioned Dangote and petrol and all of that, are you afraid that there will be a monopoly in that sector? Because even if the government moves out, you need competition, don't you?
Yeah.
To drive the prices down.
Yeah. We have other refineries.
Yeah, but they're very tiny when compared to
It doesn't mean
Dangote.
government. Yeah. That's why NNPC can regulate. How many, liters of petrol do we get from Dangote? How many do we get from Edo refineries? How many do we get from other refineries? Government can regulate that because government is the sole buyer of petrol. So with that, government can regulate the monopoly. So, but by the time Dangote refinery is, NNPC is now removing its hands and saying marketers go and buy from anywhere. That's also good. If Edo refinery will reduce its own price a little, but we know that Dangote has the muscles because it has a high capacity refinery to actually produce all what other refineries are doing. But if NNPC is not to back out totally to avoid that monopoly, NNPC can still regulate and say, okay, Edo refinery should give us some liters, Dangote refinery should give us some liters so that we are not going to have a total monopoly in the economy. So it can be controlled. It's just a matter of some policies around the energy sector.
IMF also says the Naira has been stabilized, according to it.
That's not true.
Okay, so when I read the report, I was thinking,
that's not true.
Okay, the Naira seems still severely weakened.
Yeah.
And, how does that impact the economy in general?
That's where you will know. When economists are saying we don't have to listen to IMF 100%. Yes, they can advise us. Even the Minister of Finance said so in an interview, that yes, IMF can advise us and it's not compulsory for us to take their advice at all times. But the data that IMF gives us, yes, we need those data. And also the funding that they are actually supporting us with, we need it. But some of these advices they are giving us, I think there are some other things in it. I think those advices are not too good for us. Now they say Naira is stabilizing.
Stable, yes.
But I can tell you that it's not. The Naira is weakening every day.
Yeah, yeah. And what sector of the economy are most likely to suffer, with all that is going on, with these higher interest rates?
The food inflation particularly, that's what has been driving our inflation. The cost of food has been going on. Despite that we are approaching we're already in the harvest season. We have harvested corn, we have harvested groundnut, harvest is going on. But despite that, we still see price of food still going up. So what is causing the price of food to be going up is energy. Because people need to move from one place to the other. They need to transport these food products from one place to the other around the country. And because the cost of moving both in the persons and the goods are going up, we don't have a choice. The price of food will continue to go up. So government need to find a way to subsidize either transportation or subsidize the petroleum. There must surely be a sort of subsidy. This Kenya and South Africa we are mentioning here, they have subsidy in their economy. They subsidize transportation. They subsidize energy. But here in Nigeria, we said we are not subsidizing anything. Let the citizens bear the brunt. And then we want to compare ourselves with them. It's not possible.
You know, I'm just thinking about when you speak to subsidizing transportation. What transportation do you even have? Where do you begin from? There's a lot of work to be done.
Of course.
Because you don't really have public transport. So where does the subsidy come in? I guess, I don't know.
Maybe government can collaborate with some of the food producing companies like the Olam Rice, and there are major companies that are producing food in Nigeria. Government can partner with them to say, okay, we are going to subsidize the cost of moving rice from Kano to Lagos or from Kano to Port Harcourt, and then they subsidize the cost of moving these items, these goods. So government can still come in several ways, but our public transportation system needs to be fixed. It needs urgent attention. The way government is giving attention to the roads, government also needs to put an effective, transportation system, a very safe, effective and cheap, affordable transportation system for Nigerians. And that is how government can also subsidize. But because we don't have effective transportation system, how can government subsidize transport? They can only subsidize transport by bringing back subsidy on price of petrol. And that's what we enjoyed over the years. And once that is removed, it means nothing is subsidized again. Yes. And as nothing is subsidized again, the income of individuals, of households in Nigeria can no longer sustain them, because now they said increase salary, minimum wage. President said 70,000. And as minimum wage was increased,
inflation wipes it out.
Not just inflation, the price of petrol also went up drastically, even more than the rate of the increase in this in the minimum wage.
Let's talk about debt. We've been borrowing a lot. How would this hike impact government borrowing and debt servicing?
I think if you advise me, if I'm to advise government, government needs to slow down on borrowing for now. Government needs to look inwards to find a way to generate revenue. We have so much resources in Nigeria that government can tap into. We've seen governments, signing gas contracts with other nations. We have, natural resources like the iron ore that we have. Government can look inwards and see how to invite foreign investors to come into the country to produce. Let us, be productive. We have sites for lithium, excavation, so that we can begin to produce batteries. Nigerians can begin to export batteries, but we've not seen enough investors into the economy. So I think government needs to look inwards and slow down on the borrowing, going into 2025.
Right. Dr. Aki Ogunsola, it's been great having you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
All right.